This is part 4 of the master budget. We're going to pick up with the cost of goods manufactured. And just like the cash budget, this budget here is also summary in nature, meaning we're going to refer back to most of the other budgets that we've already prepared. If you look close at the actual construction of the budget itself over here, you should note that this looks very familiar to you. And it should, because when we did a cost of goods manufactured report, that's exactly what this is. So we're just putting it in the context of the budget now. With that said, I do need to give you a word of caution here. Prior experience has told me that if there are errors to be made, it typically is in this budget right here. And it's not because it's difficult, it's just very easy to make mistakes. If you refer back when we did a cost of goods manufactured statement, I put our data in multiple columns to enhance readability. Well, if I do that on the master budget, it's going to make this be so many columns that it's going to become cumbersome. So instead, we shrink all those columns into one, and therein lies the problem. To make the budget more efficient, it can create more errors. So we're going to start with January and work our way. And we want to know the beginning work in process inventory. And if I go back to the data sheet, the work in process, which was on our balance sheet, we started with $20,000. So I will put that right there. And then we're going to add materials to it, and we're going to start with the beginning materials inventory. That is also over here on the balance sheet, and it's just one line up. The raw materials that we start with are $47,250. And so these first two values come straight from our balance sheet. Now from here on down, we're going to refer and do our calculations. So the next thing we want is purchases. And we are looking at what we bought. Not how we paid for it, but what we bought. So I'm going to go back to the purchases budget. And on that purchases budget, we said that we're going to buy almost $110,000. Now please note, I'm not referring to how we paid for it. I'm looking at what we are planning on buying. And here is where the first mistake happens. Far too often, people will highlight and then use this auto sum over here in Excel. Well, they may get carried away and highlight all of this, and that is incorrect. You only need these two items. You want to know the materials available. 47 plus 109. The ending materials inventory over here now, we need to find. We've only done part of this work. Now I'm going to refer you back to something that we already have done when we were talking about materials. Back on our schedule of materials purchases budget, we said that for January I want to have 18,580, but this is in pounds, and we're doing a cost of goods manufactured. So we're going to take this 18,580 and we're going to multiply it by this $2.25, and that will give us what we need down here for the ending materials inventory. So give me just a moment to go back and reference those. I want the 18,580, and they each are at 225, and that will yield me the 41,000 that's on your sheet. So we will subtract that from the materials available to know how much we've used. To get the labor, of course, I'm going to go back to my labor budget. That was $138,510. That should match. And then for overhead, I'm going back to the overhead budget, but I don't want just the cash overhead. I want the total amount of overhead. I want all costs. And that should match up. Now here's where the next mistake people tend to make. When it says, what are your production costs added, you just want the materials, labor, and overhead. But again, people that use the auto sum sometimes just highlight all that and add it in, and of course that gets an error. So make sure you don't do that and only add the 3 costs. Then, to get the total cost for which to account, you're going to take your production costs and add that to what you started with, the beginning work in process. And that will yield you the 302. Now the next thing we have to come up with, and this is the only real challenge to this budget, is to come up with the ending work in process inventory. If I go back to the data sheet, the ending work in process inventory says that this should be equal to 25% of next month's sales at cost. This is a cost of goods manufactured. So I need to convert that sales figure to cost. Now we got to figure out how to do this. And I've given you the extra information on here. If we go back to the first page of the data sheet, here's a piece of information. Gross profit is expected to be 40% of sales. 40% of sales. Alright, so I'm going to go back to my worksheet over here so I can do some calculations. To find gross profit, I'm going to take my sales revenue, I'm going to subtract the cost of goods sold, and that will give me my gross profit. Gross profit. Now, I know that the gross profit rate in this case is 40% of sales. If we set sales revenue to be 100%, since that is the starting point, then basically what happens is we have a cost of goods sold value here that we can say is X. So apparently the cost of what I'm selling must be 60% of your sales. 100 minus X is 40. X must be 60. Now this 60% is what I need to do the conversion. So if I come back over here to the ending work in process, recall, we want ending inventory to be 25% of next month's sales at cost. So we're going to take 25% of next month's sales. Next month, February. So I'm going to go all the way back to the sales budget, and I'm going to pick up February sales. And we are going to multiply that by the conversion percentage, which we just found was 60% over here. $25 next month's sales times 60% to convert it to cost. And that will yield you the $42,780 on your page. Now I will do this same approach for February, making sure that I refer to March's sales. But when I get to March, I need April's sales. So let's do that one together. I need 25% of April's sales. And of course, our sales budget only went through March. So I need to come back to my data sheet, go back and see what is expected for April. Well, right now we are expecting $9,800 at a sales price of $32. So I'll take the $9,800, multiply it by 32, and that will get me April sales and then just multiply it by the 60%, and you've got it converted. 25% April sales converted to cost. And again, you see that matches up on your sheet. To finish this out, once we know the ending work in process, you'll just subtract that away and you got your cost of goods manufactured. And you'll do this for every single month across, but there's some other things going on here I want to highlight your attention to. There are several diagonal effects. The end of January's work in process becomes the beginning of February. And the end of January's materials inventory automatically becomes the beginning of February. And I'll carry these forward, these relationships, as I move across from February into March. I'll also note, as we've already seen previously, that the beginning of January is the same as the beginning for the quarter. And down here at the end of these, whether it's materials or work in process, they must also equal their ends. So let's see if I can get a couple different colors on here. Something we haven't used before. And the last one I want to call your attention to is the beginning materials inventory must be the same there. So we have all kinds of relationships going on in this budget, and you can see that it gets kind of tedious. It's not difficult, but you can get lost in the detail. Now, that will get you the actual data that we need here. And remember, always play it safe when you do your summary totals. Keep it in the quarter. Don't try and add across on summary items. You may get into that, again, double and triple counting, especially for like these beginnings that carry over from month to month and so forth. The last thing on this budget I do is I actually come up with a cost per unit, because this is important for us to know how much does each unit cost me. And you can see for this company's trend, the cost is increasing, and that is definitely something that I would want to highlight when I went into a management meeting to say, listen, we got costs that are going up and we need to do something about it now, be proactive. How do I come up with that? Well, I'm going to go back and pick up my units produced, and of course, that's all the way back on my production budget. And you can see I'm doing a whole lot of references on this budget, but this is great because all these links allow me to instantly change these budgets as needed. Now, to come up with the cost per unit, you simply just take your costs and divide by your units. And that's $25.33. But I need to be a little careful about this because this is not a hard, fast number. This is what Excel is showing. If I come in and add a few more decimal places, you can really see that this is a repeating kind of number. And if you try and take these values here and carry them forward and prove it, it's not going to come up correct because you're thinking this is a rounded number and it's really not. Excel keeps up with 20-something decimal places when it does its calculations. And of course, you won't do that. So you'll think, oh my gosh, I got an error in the budget. And that's not true. So I want to show you a technique of how to round. This up here, the icons that I'm clicking up here, they do not round. They only do presentation. To do a round, you're going to use the following function. You're going to say equals round, and then you're going to open up a set of parentheses. Then you're going to tell Excel what you want rounded, and I'm just going to put that in quotations for now. You'll put a comma and then how many decimal places that you want. And then you'll close that up. Now that's the syntax. So I'm going to come back over here and redo mine. Now remember, you can see that this is not a rounded number. So let's start with round. And the good thing about Excel is it will prompt you for these syntax pieces. So notice the first thing it's saying is the number. What do you want rounded? I want the cost divided by the units produced rounded, comma, 2 decimal places. Now when I hit enter this time, notice what happens to all those decimal places? They're gone. It physically rounds it to 2533. And so this is a way of making sure that if you're only seeing this 2533, you can be safe to know there are no lingering decimal places, and if you pick this 2533 up, all your calculations will match up with it. And I do the same thing for all of these across. And that would complete the cost of goods manufactured budget. Now the next budget is the logical extension of this, like we did when we were calculating the cost of goods manufactured. We're going to do a cost of goods sold budget. And this one is rather simple. It's mostly summary again. You're going to start with the beginning finished goods inventory, and that will come from our balance sheet yet again. Finished goods inventory, $35,000. I put that there. Then for the cost of goods manufactured, we just did this. Now remember, I'm not copying, I'm not pasting, I'm not retyping, I'm referencing. I want that cell. Now you add those two together, and that's how much you have available. The next line is your finished goods inventory. And this is the only thing we really have to deal with on this budget. And we've already done half of the work. So I'm going to start myself with an equation here. And if you remember, back when we were doing the production budget, we said we wanted to have so many units on hand at the end of this month. And so that's what I want to pick up, those units for any one of these months as appropriate. Now that's units, and we're doing a cost of goods sold. So I'm going to multiply those units by our cost per unit we just determined, 2533. And that will give me the 69,911 that's on your page. And when you subtract that away, you get your cost of goods sold. Now I'll do this same approach for February and for March. And just like before, let's notice a few relationships yet again. The beginning of January is the same as the beginning of the quarter. And then, of course, the end down here of March will be the same as the end of the quarter. As always, when you're in the quarter, make sure you do your summary totals. Keep them in the quarter. Don't try and add across. You'll get into that again, double and triple counting issue. And that would be our cost of goods sold. I'm going to pause the video again here, and then in part 5 we'll do our financial statements.